Hey there everyone, welcome back to Utility Sports. Really stoked for this video as we're going to talk about some of the best free agents available in the 2024 NBA offseason. Now I'm sure a lot of you are looking forward to this one, so if you guys do enjoy, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more content. Without further ado, let's get into that video preview where we're going to talk about the top 10 available free agents this offseason. I have kind of a loose ranking. Now, with these players, some of them are so good and they're so interchangeable that I wouldn't really worry about the generic ranking too much. More so just focusing on who is actually a free agent and where I think they could ultimately land, because I do provide multiple landing spots for each star. Now, some of them I do think will just end up re-signing, so I have those players explicitly outlined as well. But some of them I do think will use free agency as a possible means of getting out of their current situation. So let's go ahead and jump into our free agent number 10, and that is DeMar DeRozan of the Chicago Bulls. Obviously has had a few good seasons with the Bulls since joining them, coming over from the Spurs. And the Bulls still owe a draft pick for him, actually, from their sign and trade deal that they pulled off a couple of off seasons ago to land DeMar DeRozan. The Bulls are now in a spot where things haven't worked out quite well with the Nikola Vucevic trade. Obviously, Lonzo Ball's injuries had a huge impact on that as well. He hasn't played the last couple of seasons, basically. The Bulls are at a spot where their depth and their talent has been tested because their whole roster hasn't been available to them, and some of their players have regressed. Someone like Nikola Vucevic, his shot data has really suggested a real steep fall off from the player he was 2-3 years ago to where he is now. He's just not the same guy. DeMar DeRozan has really been the most stable, consistent piece for them, while Zach LaVine's dealt with injuries, while Lonzo Ball's been out, while Nikola Vucevic has dropped off around him. DeRozan and Caruso really have been the two foundational pieces for the Bulls. Obviously, Kobe White broke out this year as well. So Chicago has a tough crossroads here. They extended Vucevic last offseason. Do they look to do the same this offseason with DeMar DeRozan, or does he go into free agency and find a big offer out there from some team? Ultimately, I do think he resigns in Chicago, but you're going to see that Philadelphia 76ers logo a lot in this video, because I think the Sixers are going to be heavily rumored to a bunch of different guys. Obviously, the Paul George rumors, but I think that ultimately Philadelphia, if they strike out on somebody, if they want some big name and they don't land him, they have to be ready to spend money on somebody else in some other way, whether that's another star player like a DeMar DeRozan, or splitting up their cap space to multiple players. That could also be an option for them. But Philadelphia, kind of a lot lies on them this offseason with the need to add talent. And if teams retain their players, the Sixers could be the odd man out trying to poach someone away in free agency, maybe coming up short. And that's where they would get involved with someone like DeMar DeRozan, even though he's probably not the perfect fit next to Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey, because he's more of a mid-range dominant player. Someone who can really shoot the three ball around Maxey and Embiid would be the priority, in my opinion. But DeRozan's secondary playmaking and shot-making ability still would be a positive addition to Philadelphia. But ultimately, I do think the Bulls retain him. I think Chicago's going to value what he has brought them, and really, even though they're stuck in kind of a level of mediocrity, I think that's where they're going to likely stay, because if they lose him for nothing, well, that's just terrible too. So I think Chicago's kind of stuck right now. They're in a really weird spot. I think the best case scenario that they could do is really strip down their roster, make a bunch of trades and tear it down a bit, and recenter everything around Kobe White moving forward. Even though he's not going to be the best player on a championship team, you can hopefully tank to the bottom, get more players around him. But I don't think the Bulls are really ready to do that quite yet. So I do think that they will retain DeMar DeRozan this offseason. Free agent number 9, I have Malik Monk, and this is going to raise some eyebrows, right? I'm not saying that Malik Monk is necessarily a better player today than DeMar DeRozan, but what I am saying is Malik Monk is significantly younger than DeMar DeRozan, and when you're talking about contracts, the one thing you want to refrain from is paying somebody for what they've already done. Contracts are meant to pay players forward, pay them for what they're going to do for you on that contract. So someone like Malik Monk, who, yes, he doesn't have quite the track record of success that DeMar DeRozan has, the next 4 years for him might be way more friendly than they will be for DeMar DeRozan, and that is kind of what I am foreshadowing here a bit, having Malik Monk ranked a little bit above DeRozan, because I think Monk, as a Sacramento King, has really found his footing in the league. And one thing that's really underrated about Malik Monk is his ability to drive and kick the basketball. He is an elite downhill player who gets his feet in the paint, has an extremely high assist rate on drives, gets to the rim often, puts a lot of pressure on the defense. And I think the Kings are at a spot where they really risk losing him for nothing because they only have early bird rights on him. I believe the max they can offer him is a 4-year, $78 million contract, which comes in at $19.5 million per year. And for someone like Malik Monk, I think the reality is he's worth more than that. I think some team on the open market will be willing to pay him. Now, there's not a ton of teams with cap space, and I don't think the Kings are going to be trying to help everybody in sign and trades. But ultimately, if Malik Monk wants to go somewhere for a higher dollar than what Sacramento can offer him, which it seems like a real possibility at this point, he's going to have suitors out there. Some of the suitors I see, the Orlando Magic, the San Antonio Spurs could also be a dark horse team to watch for him. And then ultimately, I do have the Kings on this list. I think Orlando should be considered the front runner at this point to land Malik Monk. They really badly need a guard who can create offense. Malik Monk has a really dynamic handle, can get his own shot off in space, can create separation. And again, with that downhill drive and kick game, Orlando, who I hope values adding a little bit more shooting this offseason, also maybe Jett Howard finds his way into the rotation next year. If they put just a little bit more shooting on the floor around Malik Monk, around Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner, all of a sudden you have a really dynamic offense that can shoot it a bit more respectably than they did this past year, while also having some of your creation players like Monk, like a Wagner, like a Banchero, able to still take you home at the end of games because of their individual talent, their individual shot creation ability. But then Monk can really serve as the de facto point guard there without siphoning too much of the ball handling responsibilities away from your two big wings that are essential. The Spurs, I do think Monk would be a great fit, but I'm not sure they're going to go out and spend a ton of money this free agency. And then the Kings would obviously love to retain him. It really, for me, comes down to if Orlando's going to offer him more than $20 million per year, they're probably going to get him. So something in the 4-year $85 million, 4-year $88 million range, probably the exact type of contract I expect to see for Malik Monk this offseason, and I think it's a really good one for whoever lands him. Moving on to player number 8, I have Isaiah Hartenstein of the New York Knicks, and boy did he step up this year when Mitchell Robinson was out for an extended period of time. We also saw Hartenstein post a triple-double in the postseason. Honestly, I think one of the more underrated players around the league. I've loved him for a long time, even back to his Los Angeles Clippers days. Remember, he was even a Houston Rocket at one point when they were playing small ball. He didn't have a role back then, but with the Clippers, he really kind of started to cement himself as a player who could operate off of short rolls and showcased his floater a ton. Obviously, has pretty good touch for a big man, pretty solid passing feel as well. I think that was something that came to play a lot in New York when teams would try to deny Jalen Brunson the basketball. Tom Thibodeau would go to a blind pig set where Isaiah Hartenstein was kind of your relief valve. He would come to the basketball, get it, and then feed bounce passes into a cutting Jalen Brunson. So Hartenstein to me is somebody who there's a lot to work with here. I expect him to get a pretty significant pay raise from what he's been playing on the last couple of years. I think one of the biggest mistakes in this entire Clippers tenure, people are going to point to the Paul George trade. People are going to question the James Harden trade. I honestly think letting Isaiah Hartenstein leave for nothing and prioritizing John Wall over him that offseason was really the disaster point for them. So Hartenstein, I think, goes into this offseason with a really big market, a really significant amount of interest from a bunch of different teams. Some teams will try and get him on the non-taxpayer mid-level exception. That's about $12.7 million. He's going to want more than that, and I think he's going to probably net more than that as well. The Knicks do have the ability to offer him a contract bigger than the non-taxpayer mid-level as well. So the Knicks probably should be considered the leader in the front house, the front runner to land him. But there's other options out here too. The Detroit Pistons could be a team looking to add a little bit more skilled size onto their roster. Obviously, they already have a collection of big men, but Isaiah Hartenstein gives them a different skill set than what they currently have at that position. And then the Orlando Magic, a team that they're slated with cap space. They're slated to be active. So even though I predict Malik Monk might go there, maybe they sniff around a center instead of a point guard, depending on what their expectations are of what they want to get done this offseason, right? They have Anthony Black. They have a few guards on the roster already. Maybe they don't want to go point guard. Maybe instead they value a big man like Isaiah Hartenstein who could really elevate their defense one more step. You can run a bunch of different pick and roll defensive schemes with Hartenstein. He's mobile enough to play at the level of the screen. He's a good enough rim protector to drop him back a little bit. And because of that, he's extremely valuable. But I think the Knicks are going to be hard-pressed to lose him. So because of that, I think the Knicks ultimately do retain Hartenstein this offseason. Player number 7 is Klay Thompson of the Golden State Warriors. And people are going to say, whoa, you still have Klay Thompson high. I thought you said this was all about what a player's going to do for you, not what he has done. Well, here's the thing. What Klay Thompson has done in his career makes him extremely valuable going forward through the rest of his career. Every time a team plays against whoever Klay Thompson's on, they're going to worry about his shooting. And the word gravity is one of the most important words in all of basketball. At the end of the day, spacing is not about where your offensive players stand. It's about where the defense has to stand to guard you. And I think someone like Klay Thompson puts so much pressure and stress on a defense, even when he doesn't have the basketball, that's going to create extra opportunities for a team looking to implement or add just a little bit more offensive juice. Klay Thompson could be the perfect player for a bunch of different teams because he has the track record, he has the resume, where on scouting reports, everyone's going to have him circled anytime he comes off a floppy action, anytime you're setting a pin down for him, anytime you're setting a flare screen for him. The odds that Klay Thompson can get 2 guys to guard his body, the more likely you're able to play 4-on-3 on other areas of the floor. So Klay Thompson, to me, I think is a huge advantage creator, even when he doesn't have the basketball, which is why I still think he's a phenomenal player for anyone to add this offseason, especially if you're looking to implement more shooting and more gravity on the floor next to a star player, next to an offensive engine. Klay Thompson could have some real serious success with another organization if he does leave Golden State. But that's a big question, right? For me right now, my expected result is that he re-signs in Golden State, but I could see a team like Philadelphia, if they strike out on other guys, they could go out and go get Klay Thompson. And I think if you're looking for someone who is a perfect fit next to Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid, someone like Klay Thompson, I think really does fit the bill. Now, he doesn't give you another offensive creator. I think the Sixers would value someone who can handle the ball a little bit more than Klay Thompson, but I do think his shooting around Joel Embiid, around Tyrese Maxey, could really formulate a unique combination with them, something we haven't gotten to see a ton even in Golden State. Klay Thompson doesn't set a ton of ghost screens. Klay Thompson is a part of a lot of off-screen action, and I think that would be phenomenal as well, giving Nick Nurse someone like Klay Thompson. We obviously saw Buddy Hield have a good deal of success there in the regular season. Now let's turn a Buddy Hield into a postseason performer, a Klay Thompson level player who can get the job done in the postseason. We've seen it multiple times in the past. I think his shooting would be very reliable in the playoffs. Yes, I know sometimes he's going to have games where he goes 0 of 6, whatever. For the most part, Klay Thompson has been one of the most reliable playoff shooters in recent NBA history. The Warriors probably retain him. I think he'll sign something around 3 years, 4 years to about $90 to $110 million, somewhere in that range, whether it's 3 years or 4 years. That's yet to be seen. Maybe $80 million, so like $27 million a year. Something like that for Klay. I could see the Warriors deciding to shell out and pay kind of as a gratitude to what he's been for them. But if the Sixers go into free agency and they don't get their preferred options, Klay Thompson could be the excellent backup choice for them in the event that they don't get their top guy. Player number 6, I have OG Anunoby here, and when the New York Knicks traded for him, it felt like a foregone conclusion that he would just re-sign with them this offseason. Well, now we have conflicting reports saying that OG Anunoby might really take free agency seriously, that he might listen to offers from other teams, and that he'll seriously weigh his future with the New York Knicks, which I think is very interesting, and I was not expecting that to be the case when they traded for him, but now the Knicks risk losing him for nothing. Ultimately, though, I don't see the Knicks really losing him. My prediction would be that he stays in New York. But again, there's the Sixers. They pop up again as another team that would be interested in OG Anunoby. And if you're looking at a forward-facing contract, OG Anunoby, he's been close to an all-star level player for a while now, averaging 17, 18 points a game rather consistently. Really good efficiency. He can shoot the 3-ball. He's really your perfect 3-and-D wing player. Not only does he shoot the 3-ball well, not only does he guard, but he can do other stuff. He's really functional in the dunker spot as an athletic rim sitter, someone who can finish above the rim out of those situations. He attacks closeouts well. OG Anunoby is just honestly a really, really good basketball player. So there's going to be a ton of teams interested in him. Now, I think the Memphis Grizzlies, if they were to try and figure out a way to get a sign and trade for OG Anunoby, they have the draft capital to interest the Knicks. Now, I'm not sure if the Knicks are going to love doing that. I think the Knicks would rather just keep OG Anunoby than trade him away. But if the Grizzlies offered enough of their future picks to get it done, maybe we could see Anunoby in a Grizzlies jersey. The Sixers, again, they make sense for any of these players. It's really up to Daryl Morey on who he wants to land and how much money he's willing to offer. Maybe the Sixers come to OG Anunoby with a max contract and put some pressure on the Knicks to either pay him, especially with a Jalen Brunson extension coming up. That could put some pressure on the Knicks front office to consider their options. But ultimately, I do think the Knicks retain not only Isaiah Hartenstein this offseason, but that they also retain OG Anunoby. They go into next year hopefully fully healthy, and they're able to build off the successful season they had this year by being healthy in the playoffs next year and then getting further than they did this year, which was a second round exit. But honestly, the Knicks are so good. They should have probably been in the conference finals if they were healthy. That's not to discredit the Pacers. They've played great. A lot of credit to Indiana, but the Knicks just really bit by the injury bug, unfortunately. No Julius Randle all postseason obviously affected their playoff run a bit. So going into next year, the Knicks are still one of the best teams in the NBA if they retain their key free agents. Player number 5, I have Paul George, and this might seem low for a lot of people. This is where, again, a forward-thinking contract is super important. Paul George, he's been an All-NBA player in the past. He's been an All-Star multiple times in the past. He's been an MVP finalist once in the past as well. He's been a great player for a long time in this league, but I do think it's clear at this point in time that he's not a top 15, top 20 guy anymore, unfortunately. So with that in mind, the question is, how much do you want to pay him? And the Clippers really do risk losing him for nothing this offseason, but there's also reports right now that they don't want to pay him more than they paid Kawhi Leonard on Kawhi's new extension, which is about $50 million per year, and I understand that thinking from LA. So do they come to agreement with Paul George, or do they sever that relationship? I think that's the biggest question here, and this is where you see the Philadelphia 76ers really getting aggressive for a specific player. I think the Sixers would be all in on Paul George as the player who, like I said with Klay Thompson, you can get a shooter around Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey. That's going to be one of the first and foremost pieces of importance for them. But also this is where Paul George's ball handling, secondary playmaking capabilities comes in huge. Now I think he has really lost a step. He doesn't blow by guys with the same fierce and quick first step that he used to. But I also think that he can still create off the bounce. He's had moments in the playoffs even. You think back to his dagger from the corner against the Mavericks in the first round. Paul George still has some real positive basketball in him. Just I think the consistency, reliability of it is on the downward trend. I could also see the Indiana Pacers as a sleeper team here for Paul George. I have the Orlando Magic listed as well. But ultimately the Clippers, they're in the driver's seat. They have bird rights on him. They can pay him more than anybody else. And I think if they want to, they can ensure Paul George stays in LA for the remainder of his career. I think this is one of the most important and interesting free agency decisions this offseason, though, because does Paul George decide to stay in LA? Does he pursue other ventures, and that other venture likely being Philadelphia? Player number 4, Pascal Siakam, who has had a tremendous postseason for himself. Just been really, really great this playoffs with his ability to make plays on both ends of the floor. A lot of timely buckets, a lot of loose ball buckets where the ball's kind of 50-50 up for grabs, and Siakam just has seemed to come down with a ton of those and then convert them into baskets as well. So Siakam's been tremendous for the Pacers, and the fact that they turned 3 pretty meh or bad first round picks into Pascal Siakam has been huge, not only for their postseason success this year, but for the direction of their franchise going forward, because I do ultimately think Pascal Siakam will stay in Indiana. I think this is a foregone conclusion. He will re-sign with the organization this offseason. I would actually be really surprised if he even takes if he takes free agency meetings, after these playoffs, because of what his role in Indiana has looked like, the essentialness of his role to them. I think the two sides will come to a pretty big extension, a pretty big contract agreement where he inks on the dotted line and commits to the Pacers for the next 4 years, probably, is what I would have to guess. Player number 3, James Harden, who I think had a tremendous playoffs for himself. Now, I know Yes, the Clippers lost to the Mavericks in 6 games. With how the Mavericks have played since then, it looks pretty miraculous that the Clippers went 6 games against them with no Kawhi Leonard. And James Harden, point blank, was the best player in that series for the Clippers. Obviously, Luka Doncic outshined him, but James Harden was the most reliable piece for the Clippers. Got to his floater a ton, was consistently blowing by the Mavericks defenders, got into the middle of the defense and made plays out of there, whether it was as a passer or as a finisher at the rim. Also, when his step back was on in that series, he looked virtually unguardable. He really willed them to a Game 1 win at home, and then obviously later in the series, he was pivotal in stealing one in Dallas. So the Clippers with Harden, I think they're at a spot here where they have to retain him. They traded for him, and I think honestly, with the risk of losing Paul George for nothing, if they come away and lose Paul George but they retain James Harden, they could maybe reshuffle the deck a little bit, find a way to improve their roster in some way, and really keep this thing afloat around Harden and Kawhi Leonard, where I think they already have a very good existing relationship off the court. I think there's a ton of respect between the two of them. It looked like Kawhi Leonard was having more fun this year than we've seen him have in the past. So I think James Harden's presence was important in that regard for the Clippers organization, and I think he is the point guard of the organization moving forward. They could definitely be active in other free agents as well this offseason. Maybe someone like Kyle Lowry, Chris Paul. We'll see how active they get in those pursuits for another point guard, depending on what happens with Russell Westbrook and his player option. But James Harden here at this point in time, very likely we see him re-sign with the Los Angeles Clippers, in my opinion. I'm not sure what his free agency landscape would look like. He's been on a bunch of teams over the last few years. I think for his own self-interest, re-signing in LA, staying with the Clippers is the best case for him, not only from an on-ball role responsibility playing for Ty Lue. From a winning perspective, I think it makes sense next to Kawhi Leonard if Kawhi Leonard can ever stay healthy for another playoff run. And on top of that, I think the biggest thing is really rebuilding some of his respect around the league by staying in one place, staying with one organization, and really putting some roots down there in LA for the remainder of his career. Player number 2 is Nic Claxton of the Brooklyn Nets. And you might say, whoa, you have Nic Claxton really high on this list. That's because I'm a big believer in this kid. The only reason he's an unrestricted free agent right now is because the Brooklyn Nets used a second-round draft pick on him before the second-round pick exception was a thing in the CBA. So now they risk losing him for nothing, even though he is now up for the first real contract of his career after his rookie deal. So who's going to be a suitor for Nic Claxton? How much is he going to get paid? And what does the market look like for him? Well, he's going to get paid really handsomely, and I could see a bunch of teams looking at him. And really, it's a 3-team race, in my opinion, to get Nic Claxton services. I think the Brooklyn Nets should be considered the front runner. They have bird rights on him. I know that internally they would love to keep Nic Claxton. Joe Tsai just recently said that he is shifting the direction of the franchise to long-term winning, and Nic Claxton would be someone who's really important in that. They want to keep him around. He has Defensive Player of the Year upside now with Victor Wembanyama and Chet Holmgren in the league. I'm not sure if Claxton's ever going to get to that mountaintop of winning a Defensive Player of the Year, but he does have a lot of fantastic traits. He's been a tremendous defender for the Brooklyn Nets, and honestly was maybe on pace to win a Defensive Player of the Year the final year of KD's tenure there in Brooklyn before Kevin Durant asked for a trade. Then Nic Claxton fell out of the limelight of the discussion. But he's got a lot of talent defensively, and then offensively, I mean, he's turned into a 12-point, 10 rebound per game guy, which might not sound like a lot, but the reliability and consistency of his offensive role as a play finisher, someone who rolls hard into the pocket, can make plays out of the pocket a bit. I think we've seen pretty decent growth for him the last couple of years as a facilitator on short rolls a little bit more. There's still a lot of room for Claxton, I think, to pick up some of that low-hanging fruit and improve as a player. But for Brooklyn, he's essential. And I could see a team like Memphis, who traded away Steven Adams this year, getting aggressive, trying to target somebody like Nic Claxton and really valuing what he could provide to them next to Jaren Jackson Jr. as an elite defensive front court. And then likewise, the big pursuit right now for New Orleans is either point guard or center. Which way will they go? What will they value this offseason? For Memphis and New Orleans to land him, they would likely have to execute a sign and trade with the Brooklyn Nets unless something crazy happened where teams operate to clear up cap space, which I can't see either Memphis or New Orleans really doing. So that means maybe something centered around a Brandon Ingram sign and trade where the Nets get Ingram, the Pelicans get Nic Claxton, and maybe there's some other stuff going from New Orleans to Brooklyn in exchange for that. But Claxton could be a really great centerpiece for the Brooklyn Nets as a DHO handoff guy, a real rim roller, someone with great touch. And defensively, again, the Pelicans have a good team defense. Now, if you add a rim protector into the equation, someone who can really shut down the paint a bit more than Jonas or Valanciunas or Larry Nance do, that's where you get some real upside for the way you have your defense built. So New Orleans could be a really great option as well for Nic Claxton. But ultimately, I do think he stays in Brooklyn on a contract somewhere around 5 years, $125 million, looking at about $25 million per year. And I think it would age pretty well with the likely jump we see in the cap over the next couple of years. Then player number 1 is LeBron James, and this should be no surprise that he is still number 1 on this list because he continues to defy all odds. At age 39, he was unbelievable, stellar, spectacular, clearly the Lakers' best player again this season, and it's just unbelievable to me how he continues to perform at such a high level. The amount of work and care he puts into his body makes him well worth the investment here, even at 39 years old, because of what he's going to do for an organization. Not only is he going to promote winning, he's going to put a lot of pressure on your organization to try and win and to win right now, but also he's going to sell a lot of tickets, he's going to sell a lot of jerseys, he's going to make your franchise extremely relevant because he is one of the biggest names in all of sports history. He's arguably the greatest of all time, and I still think getting him at 39 years old, even as he ages, he's going to be a tremendous player. And I think even in the back end, say 3-4 years from now, if he's still playing at 42, 43 years old, he could be a tremendous floor general point guard, even if his scoring dwindles a bit, even if he's not rebounding as much, and even if his defense isn't as consistent. Obviously, that's been a downward trend for him the last couple of years. He could still be a tremendous floor general point guard with his overall IQ, passing feel, and the size for the position. He would be tremendous in that role as well. So right now, he's still a franchise player. Obviously, he was an essential piece in leading the Lakers to the postseason this year. Made All-NBA again, so that is a franchise player. We're talking about a top 15 player in the world. He deservingly made All-NBA. So I know some people will meet my analysis here with criticism on LeBron James. He is a franchise-defining player. And this offseason, he has a lot of options, and there's a few ways we could see him move around. First of all, he could stay with the Lakers. That's definitely a real possibility if he wants to stay in Southern California. That's where a lot of his business ventures are. It just makes a ton of sense. But there are a few other destinations that make sense as well, and it honestly feels like his 2018 free agency with these 3 teams listed. The Sixers, we've obviously talked about Paul George, Klay Thompson. We've talked about the Sixers a lot. Remember back in 2018, there was a rumor saying LeBron James would maybe consider going to play with Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid at the time and taking his talents to Philadelphia. Now, he did not ultimately do that, but maybe he returns back to the land. And this is where the Lakers could get some real benefit. The Cavs, there's a lot of drama right now. There's the potential Donovan Mitchell doesn't extend, but in the event that he does, there's a report saying that Darius Garland would want to get traded. This is where a sign and trade actually makes a good deal of sense for both sides. The Lakers would walk away with Darius Garland in a trade. The Cavaliers reacquire LeBron James, put him next to both Donovan Mitchell, Jared Allen, and Evan Mobley, and from there you have a ginormous, huge team with a ton of talent, a ton of offensive upside, and I think LeBron could really unlock some of that big-to-big work between Evan Mobley and Jared Allen, making the two of them dynamic offensive players. Do you think, you know, people are going to say, well, that's too big. Their lineup's a little clunky. It doesn't work. Think about the year the Lakers won the 2020 NBA Finals. They had JaVale McGee and Dwight Howard playing a lot of center. They had Anthony Davis playing a lot of power forward. For me, Evan Mobley, offensively, he's not as good as Anthony Davis, but the skill set is similar. Anthony Davis has not been a great jump shooter for the majority of his career. The Cavaliers would then try and win games on defense and allowed LeBron James and Donovan Mitchell to be their offensive hubs, the guys who really create a majority workload of the offense. And I think it just positionally makes a little bit more sense than how Garland and Mitchell has worked out, because it's a relatively small backcourt. The two of them, it kind of is a little bit my turn, your turn. And I just don't know if Darius Garland is getting maximized in that way. And with the Cavaliers' recent signings last year of Max Strus, George Niang, they have Sam Merrill as well. I think there's enough shooting off the bench and around the core nucleus of players to make Cleveland work. I think the Cavaliers are a great landing spot for LeBron. Now, there are other teams rumored to be interested in LeBron. There was some Mavericks rumors. They're about to make the NBA Finals, it seems. So I wouldn't bet on LeBron going to the team that just made the Finals. At this point of his career, I also would not bet on him going to Phoenix. There's a rumor out there saying that he'll go anywhere Bronny goes, and that's why the Suns might spend pick 22 on Bronny James. That would be shocking to me. If LeBron James signs for anything less than a max contract, I think that would be a huge mistake by him on what is probably his last big NBA contract. He should be looking to sign something for 4 years, $160 million if he's able to, and continue adding to his bank account. Now, I know people are going to say he's a billionaire. Yeah, you don't get to become a billionaire by passing up on big money when it's offered to you. So LeBron James knows that. For the majority of his career, he has not taken less than the max. I don't think he's going to want to now at this point of his career either. Yes, maybe someone drafting his son does entice him a little bit, but at the end of the day, I expect him to try and go somewhere where he feels like he has a chance at winning championships. And if he goes back to Cleveland, him and Donovan Mitchell form a really unique offensive pairing. They have the defensive pieces behind them in Evan Mobley and Jared Allen to really shut down teams, win the glass defensively as well, and they have the requisite shooting there as well. Now, again, I would not rule out a Lakers return. I think that is a very real possibility just given the lifestyle aspect of things, but maybe a third tenure in Cleveland could be what it takes to get LeBron to his 5th NBA championship at some point. Not guaranteeing that or anything. The league is very, very strong right now. The Celtics seem like an impossible task. And beating a team like Cleveland, look, second round team, maybe LeBron can really enhance where they're at right now. But the Lakers, if they walked out of that with Darius Garland, would have to feel pretty good about kind of reshaping the direction of their franchise after losing a 39-year-old LeBron James for a guard in his mid-20s who has looked like an all-star caliber player in the past. So that'll be essential to watch as well. Thank you guys all so much for watching. Make sure you comment your free agency predictions down below in the comment section. I want to hear where you guys think some of these top 10 free agents are going to go. And we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.